and away we go. Welcome back to the Getting Salty Experience podcast, the only one that brings Firehouse Kitchen Table to you and all the greatest, the saltiest, the most knowledgeable firefighters in the world, because this is the self-proclaimed best podcast in the whole world. Tonight we got Louis' younger brother Lenny on tonight. Lenny Refrano's joining us.
I had to get that thing off my face. I had to do
it.
Did? Yeah, I had
it. It's hunting season's over, and you're like, let me go back to babyface Louis.
I had to get it off. No good. No bueno.
We missed you last week. Had a good show, but we missed
I saw it. I watched it. I watched a little of it. It was
God bless you.
Hosh and Hankel. I mean, how can you beat that?
Yeah, the Hosh and Hank show. It's excellent. So you want to tell everybody where you were last week, or we're not letting that cat out of the bag?
I'm buying a farm.
He's buying a farm
in Iowa.
Just like that in Iowa. Hey, what'd you do last week, buddy? Oh, no, I went to Iowa.
I flew to Iowa.
Like a 50-acre farm. I'm going to start producing some corn and soybeans or something. I don't know.
That's what I like doing. So
you're going to go there and just...
He already bought the farm. Not yet, Gonzo. You can't get my spot yet. Take it easy.
So you go. So you're gonna basically hunt on that property, is what you're saying?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna be farming it. Not me personally, but I'm gonna have a farmer who's been on there.
You can't get your hands dirty like that. You're a big, you're a big podcast executive. You can't fucking can't be doing that. I got your Christmas card, by the way. Thank you.
What do you mean?
The Christmas card you said. Bob, Sideshow Bob, could you pull up the Louis' Christmas card of him and Rosie?
Come on. What are you doing?
What? Bob?
What about Bob?
Bob, the picture I sent you, the Christmas card. Bob, Mike, Bob.
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah. You got that, Bob? What happened?
He's in a pure panic back there. You know that
right now. Shit's he just unloosened his tie. There it is. There's Louis and Rosie. Louis and Rosie's Christmas card coming.
I'm not living out there.
Coming in shit hot from Iowa. There he
is. But you know, if the shit hits the fan and the big Armageddon comes, the apocalypse, I could be out there. It'd be better than being here.
You got room for us out there?
I'll take the curtains with me. You know.
What about?
Yeah,
they allow Asians out there.
Absolutely,
we do.
Aim small, miss small. You know what I mean?
Put them in the rice fields. We can have the kids pick the rice.
What's the matter with you?
What?
What's the matter with you? No good. No bueno.
How do you think Gonzo did? He was a little tight, but then he loosened up, man.
It takes a while.
You got to ease into it, bro. You just can't.
He kind of looked like me a little bit too.
It doesn't happen overnight. You know what I mean?
He's a good-looking Italian. You know, that's how it works. You know.
Oh, he's Puerto Rican, ain't he, or something like that? Gonzalez? We talking about Italian.
I don't know. It looks Italian.
I don't know, but we got a good show tonight.
It's like slow down.
Coming right off the rescue diving, we're going right into collapse. Sticking with the rescue services, and what people don't realize is collapse happens more often than you might think. Ruffy, like we were talking to Hank, and he said, I think it's what he say his first 7 months or something. There he went to 3 collapses. We'll get the story.
3 collapses in 18 months or something.
18, something.
Major collapses, like not
yeah.
You know, the little ceiling. My ceiling fell down. My sheetrock.
Yeah, 44% Italian. All right, and then we got the gentleman who wrote "Work with Giants." Right? He's a giant himself.
Never heard of him.
Nope, he's talking about working with giants when it's so funny that the next generation comes and we consider him one of the giants. Isn't that funny how that works? But I can assure you this: people that come after me aren't considering me a giant. Not happening.
They're considering a lot of other things, but giant was not the word that they were going to use.
Nope.
No doubt.
Yeah. All right. So what do we got tonight? Oh, we don't have the sponsor tonight. So why don't we bring him in, Murphy? Why don't you're a little rusty. You came in off a little hiatus from, picking the soybeans. Why don't you bring in the guest tonight, buddy?
All right.
We don't have the sound effect. Oh, by the way, by Monday, we should have the sound effects board. My man, Pete Producer's coming over. He set me up over here. I'll have the noise. I'll have the sound effects. We're all ready to go.
All right. Our 2 legends, Chief John Norman and our senior dude, Frank.
Good old Frank.
Frank Molle.
I don't have the sound effects. What do you think?
I really missed the sound. I really missed that
the sound
chair.
effects.
I need the chair when they come in.
I'll have it sitting here on my desk. It'll be hooked up.
What's up, guys? How are you?
You agree with that statement?
Good.
At some point, nobody's ever going to look at me as a giant, bro. That's not happening, right? Do you agree? Hank's like,
all's well.
Unfortunately, I agree.
He ain't lying. I can't. How could you have to? Chief, how would you have wrote that book? How would you have wrote that book when everybody was 5'6"?
Oh, come on. I think he meant giants.
Listen, some of the giants of that job were among the less statured people, if you will. You know,
this is true.
I mean, Joey Angelini was what, Hank? 5'3", 5'4".
I think he was a little taller than that, but he wasn't much over 5'6", I would think.
Oh, whoa!
Oh, man.
He was 5'6" with the cigarette.
Yeah. Now, when you were writing that book, did you ever consider yourself like the people like me and Louie that you guys would be the giants that you're talking about and writing about?
Not me.
No, see, he's a humble guy.
I mean,
I like it.
Come on, I had legendary people to look up to. You know, I was just a placeholder.
How do you think we feel looking at you two guys?
Listen, like John said, myself included, if tonight I don't have a Rescue 1 or a 288 shirt, I have engine 280 ladder 132, because that's where I started. And to me, that's where those senior men and those officers were the guys that I looked up to and aspired to be. So,
I didn't know you started out in Staten Island, Hank. That's crazy.
In the pre-show.
I got lost the first night tour going to the firehouse, but I ended up on Staten Island.
In the pre-show, Coobs and Hank and myself, we were kind of breaking each other's balls, going back and forth. And the chief said, he goes, so that's how it was. It must have been like in 288. How you guys breaking balls up? Me and Coobs at a split second, we're like, no, that's not how it was. We didn't say a freaking word.
Nope.
Yes, sir. Nope. No, sir. Whatever you need, sir. Like we were running around like chickens.
Come on, I used to wash the windows for Hank when he was the chauffeur man on the rig.
Mr. Windeck. Tell you, get your hands off my rig.
He did. Yep.
Mr. Windeck.
Yeah. All right. You know what? Before we dive into Collapse, of course, we are a very patriotic show. So, Sideshow Bob, could you please bring up the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I forgot the two shameless plugs. So, if you guys want to have your questions read to these two giants of the industry, don't forget it's in this super chat. Look at him. He's right on it. Thank you. Yep. And also, looking for any kind of swag. I don't have my cup. Ruffy don't have. We got no getsaltyapparel.com, where you'll find all your coolest, even the one that Hank gave us, one of the original shirts. Pull your boots up. It's time to go to work. Excellent. So if you're looking for that stuff, get on our website and throw some shekels our way. Appreciate it. All right, so let's get right into it. We said we're going to start out with some of the causes of collapse. Bob, Chief Norman was gracious enough to send us that little bullet point there. If you want to pull it up, and Chief, if you want to go through some of these things, and we'll just get started.
Yeah, well, they're the more prevalent ones. Chief Dunn did a survey back in the 80s, and at that time, there were about 500 major collapses a year in the country, and about 100 of them were in New York City.
Wow.
And certainly we've experienced our share of fires that have resulted in collapses with members trapped, and then it's us that's in trouble. Explosions and bombings, heavy snow, rain, especially that combination. If you get a heavy snow, you get a foot of 18 inches of snow on a roof, and then it starts to warm up and you get rain afterwards. All that snow soaks up the rain and just becomes ultra heavy. It's just a killer. We get it every year, hurricanes and so on, and high winds. I got a collapse that we were going to talk about. I thought about it was just a high wind, gust of wind blew over a wall and killed a couple of people. Right now, you see out on the West Coast in particular, flooding, and again on the West Coast, but anywhere, earthquakes. All of these, bring buildings down, big buildings. I mean, concrete buildings. Overloading of stock. We used to have a lot of that in Manhattan during the industrial era when we'd have fires and the exterior streams would be soaked up by the stock. Very often it was fabric and so on, and it pushed walls out, pushed columns over, and overloaded the floor. And the older the buildings get, they just have a lifespan. So each of these things combine to cause collapses, either localized or in some cases total. Overlooked ones. I was driving by. I was in a tower ladder company driving down Broadway in Brooklyn, and all of a sudden a wall fell off the third floor and landed in the street right in front of us. What the heck is going on? We go into this building, do a primary search. While we're up there, the building starts shaking again, and now another major piece of the wall falls off. It was just an old building that sat above a subway line and next to an elevated line, and the building was shaking apart literally from the subway train hitting, different rail splits and just falling apart. One that Hank is going to cover tonight, undermining. People, doing construction on a neighboring building and the foundation fails. Just either faulty construction to start with or shoddy renovation. In all of those causes, have brought buildings down. Take out one column with a car and you can bring a building down, and have brought buildings down. So those are some of the major causes, and they happen every day all over the country.
So it could be any one of those, or it could be multiple things on that list that occur over time. Old building, weight, fire, a multiple combination of any of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you ever sit in a firehouse that's under the L? And every time the train comes by, what is it? Every 3 minutes? Like, it's incredible. The whole firehouse shakes. Like, it's incredible. Yeah. Like, you think that one stuck out to me because that one I would definitely, I know that's happened. You hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And that's something that you have to keep in mind. We'll talk about it later on. But if you're involved in a collapse and now you're going to be entering that, you got to get those vibrations shut down.
Mm-hmm.
They'll cause a secondary collapse on you.
So before we get any further, because you said something that rang a bell when you guys pulled up to a collapse or a brick that came out. Bob, pull up that one collapse that 103 had a while back, Bob. You know what I'm talking about.
Video showing part of a building in Northeast D.C. reduced to rubble. The collapse just missed two people who were walking by.
Bro, that 103 has got the quickest turn.
The chief knows. The chief knows. Sheffield Avenue, they turn out. We're 84.
I'm telling you, that's exactly what happened to me. I was in 111, and all of a sudden, that building fell down right in front of me.
That's incredible.
That rig looked like a tiller. It might have been 175.
Could have been 175.
I don't know.
They made it big Sheffield, didn't they?
I'm just saying.
I'll give you that one.
All right. Before we get into the actual stories, let's talk about the responses. How we turn out for a collapse. I may have forgot some of this stuff, but what do they get on a collapse, Chief? What's responds on a collapse? You get
the big deciding factor is if they give the 1060. The 1060 is a preloaded package of equipment units that any major disaster, the first due engine officer can give the 1060 signal, and it sets a huge package of resources on the road. And I'm with you, Kev. I'm out away from it a while, but I believe it's the second alarm, 2 rescue companies, a squad company, the Hazmat company, 4 battalion chiefs, the deputy chief, and I mean, numerous additional units, the TAC unit, but it's 2 collapse rescue task forces, which is a rescue company, a shock support ladder company,
Right.
and the collapse rig for that. So that's the, starting point of, responses.
So in the beginning, Rescue 3 had the only collapse unit, right? The secondary collapse unit. There it is in I don't know what Mike
90
said,
something,
Bob
95 or
said,
something.
90 something like that. So as we were talking about in the pre-show, you were explaining why Rescue 3 was given the collapse support, the truck.
Yeah, when I was in Rescue 3 when we were designated as the collapse unit. And at the time, this is now mid 80s, and Rescue 1 and 2 were the scuba units. Rescue 4 was the Hazmat unit, and then the backup to Hazmat Company 1. Rescue 3 was kind of just not committed to anything else. And the problem is when you get into the technical rescue disciplines like this, to be a scuba unit, that's a full-time job. It is a massive amount of training. And then to take on collapse and take on all the other disciplines, it was the job felt it was just asking too much of any one unit to try to do everything and be masters at it, not just to do it, but to really be best you can be at it. So Rescue 3 became the collapse unit for the city, which later on it became obvious that it was inadequate. If you're in the Bronx and you have a collapse on Staten Island, you might have an hour and a half ETA, depending on traffic. So it was obviously inadequate. That's where we started.
John, do you remember when we first got on the job? There was no 1060 signal. Didn't that come like 8 or 10
it's
years
much later.
later?
Yeah, it's much later.
No, that was probably 2000.
I was going to say in the 2000s.
98.
Yeah.
In that era.
Okay.
Right. So what did they do for collapse as far as material and tools before they had a designated collapse unit? Well,
Well, each of the rescues had a stockpile. I was in Rescue 3, as I said. We had timbers stored behind the rig. And if you got a collapse, we'd throw the timbers on the rig. Actually, I remember going down to one of my first collapses. It was on Delancey Street in Manhattan. Big tenement fell down, people trapped, and we get special called as the 3rd or 4th rescue. And we weren't even a collapse unit at the time, but now we get special call down there because of the number of people trapped. And that's what we did. We stopped, we threw timbers and shoring on the rig. We already carried trench jacks and a lot of stabilizing materials, but the extra long timbers, you couldn't run around with those on the rescue rig. We're talking 16, 18, or 20 footers, 6x6s. So they were stored in quarters.
So what year do you think they started to come up with the shoring and all of that stuff? The 60s, before that, or when did they start getting procedures on collapse? Because I was very surprised to hear that with the rescue diving, we didn't have anything all the way up into the 80s.
I'm sorry, you cut out there, Kev. What was that?
I said before that time where we had a rescue collapse or whatever, what was in place before that? Because like I said, I was surprised when we did the rescue diving that we had nothing all the way up and through the 80s. So when did they actually put procedures down and start teaching the shoring and the cribbing and all of that stuff?
Well, that was 92. I was a lieutenant in Rescue Company 2, and Jimmy Curran and George Crucia was working at the Division of Training for Chief Valenzano, and that's where we began the rescue school. We started.
Is that me or him?
I think that's John.
Ah,
He must have the same internet I have.
yeah. What are you on the same cable?
Well,
Sharing a cable.
Are you getting me? I'm cutting out here.
Yeah,
You're
that's
all right. You're all right.
Go back. Go ahead, John. That was you.
It was me cutting out. Okay. In 92, as I said, we did the collapse module. We did a confined space modules. John O'Connell did a vertical shoring, a horizontal shores, rake shores. That's when we started in 92. And it's progressed, since then. Now everybody coming into the command gets each of those disciplines.
Okay. Is he gone again, or is that me?
No, it's you. He's there.
That's true. He's there.
Okay.
Yeah. You know
So
what?
It must be you, Hank. Pay your bill.
Come on. See?
I paid a bill. That's what we talked about this.
You know what's amazing to me, before you come into SOC when you're a regular fireman, you say, SOC. You don't realize how many disciplines that you have to be proficient at and how many schools you have to go to and to keep those certifications up. It's like mind-blowing the amount of things that you have to say, like I said, stay proficient in, including fires and all that other stuff. It's just guys on the outside don't realize what
just remember this, Kev. Like tonight, the collapses that John and I are going to talk about, these were all handled before there was any formal collapse training at the Rock. This was where you went to your company and you learned from the guys that were in the company.
Right.
Like John said, we used, we carried some 4x4 timbers under, long timbers under the bench seat. And, you did when you got there, you always saw if we needed more, there was going to be sources that were going to get you more lumber, whether they had to go to a lumber yard or you were going to take lumber that had collapsed and cut it. There was the guys were can-do type of people.
Right.
We had all the tools that were necessary.
And they've been going to collapses for 100 years.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like they must have been going to collapses and improvising long before there was any, anything on the books, or, of how to do this or how to go about it.
Right. So
we learned, Gabe, during World War II, had tons and tons of experience during the Blitz. They shored thousands and thousands of buildings, pulled tons of people out of that debris. So they wrote it down. We actually had I believe it was a deputy chief assigned to the London Fire Brigade before the United States was in the war to copy the lessons, get as much information as he could to pass it back to our people, because it was, valuable lessons. So our entire collapse rescue plan is based on the Blitz of 1939, 40, 41 from the London Fire Brigade. And it still works great today. If you don't do it, you are really flying blind.
Right. Because it is that there's some of the tools we have are better, battery, you don't need the generator with the wires and stuff, but it's still pretty much, you still got to get into those voids and with your tape measure and figure out what needs to be cut and radio out, I need this cut, I need this cut, and you still need wooden wedges, it's just, it's still getting down to it, manual labor and knowing your whole premise is to try not to cause another collapse while you're shoring and making your way to try to find trapped victims. So it's not like you're coming in with a machine and you're digging or anything, because then you might as well just kill everybody.
Right. And since, you're out more than me, Hank. I don't know when you got out, Chief, and Louis just out, but since the beginning of the collapse to where it is now, we were talking about that a little bit, right? And the collapse pods that we have, and all the SOC support trucks who can help, extra hands.
The struts, they had the headsets to listen to for victims, right? They had so many different, even coming back from when, even in my just in my little bit of time from 98 to 2000, when I was a fireman there, getting promoted, being out for almost 10 years, and then coming back, everything was already, we had struts that were, hydraulic. Everything was, we had a few of those, but everything was changed. And then to have the stuff that you could listen to, we had the box, you had, all that stuff that you could listen to was crazy.
Yeah, no, we've come a long, long way, but like Hank said, it's tools. The basic is still the same. You have to perform the basics, the same steps. You got to go through the same motions. Okay, you're using a different tool. Instead of trench jacks, you're using an air strut. Instead of cutting timber, maybe you might be, again, using a strut or something like that. But it's still the same basic premise.
Right. And even like air struts, and that you're generally shoring up in a bigger area. Maybe you're holding a wall or something. If you're in a tunneling situation, even those, you're pretty limited to like I say, back to the old, the old.
Well, the thing was, you go in with the air strut, boom, you hold it. Now the guy's cutting it because you're going to use that further in, right? You're just going to keep leapfrogging, so he still has to cut to that spot. You can't have struts all over the place, right?
Right.
Yeah, except Hank's point is that's great. If you got a 2-foot high void, some of the places we're going, I mean, you're going into, 12, 18 inches high.
Yeah, no.
So the struts ain't it.
Right.
It's okay. Now we're doing it with, almost, cribbing, 4x4s and whatever piece of debris you find that fits.
Right.
Yeah, I hated that.
All right. Is that him or me again?
No.
We're in.
Okay.
But they even the collapse simulator that they had, and now that they have a newer one now, was incredible, right? To cut reed bar, like to actually simulate what you were going through was really, even back then was incredible what they did, and now seeing the new one that they have is even more, lifting slabs and
the debris pile.
Yeah, it's incredible.
They've come, say, tremendous way.
Right.
But I mean, a lot of that. I mean, we had the ideas, we didn't have the funding. So much of that is the result of federal money that came in after 9/11.
Right.
The UASI grants, all the counterterrorism spending is the only thing that got us to where we are.
Right.
And it was a need.
Right.
Having, again, Rescue 3 being in the Bronx, in a city that's made up of islands connected by tunnels and bridges, there have been threats to bring the tunnels and bridges down and isolate the borough. And now Rescue 3 can't help. Okay, so that's why in 2002, 2003, we started getting all these extra resources. Now every borough has its own collapse rig. Now every borough has at least 2 of the collapse shoring pods, because disposables, that's one of the lessons that we've learned. You go through, metal cutting saw blades. You go through 100 metal cutting saw blades easily. So we have stocks of hundreds of metal cutting saw blades and concrete cutting saw blades, all the disposables, extra timbers stocked within each borough. They're not first response pieces of equipment. They're stored out of the way. And actually, the way they were designed is they're on a Department of Sanitation pickup truck or roll-off container truck. Sanitation actually gave us 2 of their brand new rigs that were coming off the assembly line. We had them painted white and put them in service immediately. But we wanted them, if all our units are tied up in a borough, we wanted them to be able to go and we'll tell you what firehouse it's at, go pick up a pod, bring it here.
Right. Let me ask you a question, too. I don't want to get too far off, but we mentioned his name before, Chief Dunn. Are you surprised at all at the understanding and the knowledge of collapse without actually having worked in special operations? Or did he ever talk to the guys in special operation about collapse?
All the time.
Yeah.
Vinnie, I mean.
Whoa. Tick, tick, tock. Do.
Oh,
Oh.
Okay. Uh-oh.
All right, Hank.
Listen, he's making my internet look good tonight.
There he is.
There we go.
Go ahead, Chief.
It's me. Okay. No, I mean, like I said, Vinnie would come to the firehouse off duty and study. Show me what's new. Show me what you have that goes with collapse. He would be there. Like I say, he's a master of his subject. That's all he wanted to know about.
Right. All right. I just thought that was interesting.
And you know, again, Chief Dunn liked to get to know his firefighters in his division, and you know, like he would come by quarters and like John said, you know, especially like with Rescue 1 when he was 3rd Division, he would come in, have a cup of coffee, and just pick the guy's brains and like get to know you and get to know, he was feeling us out as much as he was learning, and he, to see, I guess he knew he could depend on everybody, but if you had younger guys in the company, it gave them a chance to, to spout off and, what they knew also. And it was good because they knew at any time you might have a deputy chief that was interested coming in and asking you questions. So you better know your stuff.
Right. All right, so let's go. I think the chief story was first. Let's go up to the Bronx on 3rd Avenue and set up that whole collapse for us, Chief. Where you were working, how it happened, what you saw, what you guys did, etc.
Okay, well, it was April 8th of 1987. I was a firefighter on Rescue 3, and we were actually at another incident about 5 blocks away. We had gone to a welder who had ignited his tanks. He was badly burned. And as we pulled up, that was at 138th Street and Willis Avenue. We pulled up there, and there's an explosion about 5 blocks away at 141st Street and 3rd Avenue. And I don't know, I never heard it. I don't know anybody on the rig who heard it, but we had to be just within a couple of blocks when this massive 4-story building blows up and lands on a 1-story building next to it. So we got there right away. The building on the right, where the tower ladder is, that's the right edge of the building. They were about 20 feet wide, and where all the firefighters are working in the pile on the left was the remains of what was a 1-story building. It was a bodega there, Spanish grocery store. There were people killed on a sidewalk. There were people trapped in cars on the side. It parked out in front. It's absolutely bedlam. You could see that this is an explosion as opposed to just a building collapse by the amount of debris blown out into the street. And that's a clue for that first arriving officer who's pulling up, and you see something like that. When you see timbers splintered, when you see brick walls blown to dust, that's an explosion.
Small stuff there.
So this was caused, actually, a couple of guys selling an illegal gun decided the buyer wanted to try it out. So they went down into the cellar of this vacant building, the 4-story building on the right, drew a picture on the wall, a target on the wall, and took a couple of shots. They didn't bother to look on the other side of the wall. Right behind the wall was the gas meter. So it ends up with 338 caliber slugs through it. They run out of the building. It doesn't ignite right away. They smell, people in the nearby buildings, people in the street smelled gas, called the utility, but nobody called the fire department, which may have been a good thing. It might have saved firefighters' lives, because when this thing let go, you see the damage it did. The roof that you see there on the left side, that is a steel-plated roof.
Wow.
It's about 1/8 inch thick, 4x8 sheets of steel plate welded together. And that has now come down on top of what remains of the bodega. So when we get there, the first step of responding to any of these incidents is size up, like anything else. You got to size it up. You need to learn to look for patterns. You need to learn to recognize the presence of voids, where a void's going to be, because that's where survivors can be found. We need to look at surface victims. There were people passing by on the street. There was a 3-month-old baby and his mother in a carriage, the baby in a carriage and the mother pushing them by. They were buried on the street. So simultaneously, several steps are going on. You got your scene survey or your size up going on, and immediately you can start doing what we call lightly buried victim removal. The people who are just buried under a couple of boards of 2x4s or hit by bricks and just laying there covered in dust, you can start taking them out of the way. You don't have to be a collapse expert to do that. And that's really one of the duties that our driving units are, particularly the engine companies. That's what we tell them to look for. They're CFRD trained. Get those people, if you got to board them, you got to collar them, whatever, get them out of harm's way. Our first arriving ladder companies can almost immediately begin moving toward the second or the third step. The first step, again, is size up. The second step is surface victim removal. Immediately, though, we can start looking for voids, and we'll talk more about voids. You can see where there are holes that a human body can fit. That's what a void is. I have some pictures of different styles of voids, Bob, that you might want to bring up. There we go. Well, that's the Third Avenue explosion. I think I sent some others of just different types of voids. But on the right side of that building, there is a void that runs the entire length of the building. It's 60 feet deep and it's about 20 feet wide, and it hasn't collapsed all the way to the ground. A void is a space where structural elements are held up by something else that is stronger and keeps it off the people that are underneath it. In this case, the wall is holding one side of this collapsed floor. The other side is resting down on the ground. So there's a huge space underneath. So Lieutenant Paul McFadden was the boss in Rescue 3 that day. He takes a look, and it's obvious. There's a void that runs, into this building. He says, get the saw. There's a metal roll-up gate in front. Get into that storefront and see if there's anybody in there. And if there's nobody in there, see if you can find a way into the cellar, into either the store that you're in or into the cellar underneath on the left-hand side. So that's what I did. Oh, no. Okay, that's, God. That's 23rd Street.
Uh-oh, Bob. Strike two.
Okay. But so now we start looking for voids. Myself and Mike Loftus from Rescue 4 cut a roll-up gate. We get in there, and it's a clear void. It's what we call a lean-to void, a supported lean-to void. It's not in that much danger of secondary collapse. So it's pretty easy to search. We can get through that and get out. In the meantime, the rest of the unit, Nicky Giordano, Lieutenant McFadden, Harry Christensen, and Bobby Green, they start looking for other voids, and they find holes, again, under the roof that has now collapsed down, and they start just walking or crawling through a space. Void search is not tunneling. Void search is just that. It is going through existing openings. We're trying not to do anything like pushing anything out of the way or cutting anything out of the way because we don't have the shoring in place yet. Void search is just going through an opening without disturbing anything else. You're looking for people. The big problem with looking for somebody in a collapse is you can't recognize them. Everything is a uniform gray dust. They're coated. You don't see a person. It's just dust, like everything is covered in dust. So the thermal imaging camera is a valuable tool for that. The thermal imager will pick up the body heat that you look for. and we're calling out. You're listening for them making any sound, whether it's, calling for help or just maybe banging. And that's a tip, we tell firefighters, if you're ever caught in a collapse, if you can't talk or if you can't, call out, if you can just rap, if you can make a rhythmic sound that is clearly human, that's a human sound. It's not, which could be coming from, water dripping or a mechanical incident that's repetitive. No, when you do that, everybody knows that's somebody there. So now that's what we're looking for and listening. That confirms the presence of a live victim. If we know that we've got a live victim there, we find it during the void search, we can kind of hone in on where they are. Now we can begin the next step, which is, tunneling or trenching, or what we call selected debris removal. You're not just going in there and throwing bricks and sticks out of the way. We're taking it apart one piece at a time with a specific goal of reaching that person. And that can take hours and sometimes days in big, you get some of these earthquake-caused concrete collapses. It can take days to cut their way through to a person. So that's all, important steps. And then the last step, we're not going to, do it right away, is what we call general debris removal. After we've gotten every live victim out that we can find, we've gone through all the voids, we've deployed the listening devices like Louis talked about, listening for those sensitive vibrations. We've deployed the cameras, we deployed the thermal imaging devices. We don't find anybody still alive. Okay, now we're going to have to take the rest of this thing down right to the foundation to make sure we haven't left anybody in that debris. And it's a long, arduous, time-consuming, basically personnel-intensive operation. The first 4 steps are done without any mechanical equipment. We're not talking bringing in bulldozers or payloaders or cranes. This is all strictly done by hand. So, yeah, very, very labor-intensive and a very dangerous operation. A collapsed structure is like a giant pile of pickup sticks or Jenga blocks. You take the wrong block out, you bring the whole thing down on your head. So,
right, Chief, let me ask you a question. It's a natural tendency for firefighters to want to get in there. So if you're coming in as a rescue, coming in, like I said, natural tendency, you might have the full first alarm or second alarm system in there.
Absolutely.
You want to back them out and say, yo, guys, we got too many guys in here right now, man. You don't know what they're going to touch, what they're going to pull, the weight of them. Is that something that you got to?
Absolutely, Kev. This collapse we're going to talk about here at the 3rd Avenue collapse, we had people working in void spaces and other well-meaning people doing things in other areas that were causing secondary collapses. And Chief Burns, thank God, was the very strong incident commander. 6th Division, Phil Burns was a great, great officer. He basically, freeze, stop. Don't do anything else over there until I tell you. So a very strong incident command is critical. You have to get people working on the same page. They have to understand this could really make things worse. We might have multiple avenues of approach to an area, but it has to be coordinated. And if anybody's doing something that's causing a secondary collapse or threatening a secondary collapse, you got to stop.
Yeah.
Again, only, people who have really been trained, who've done this, understand how critical that can be.
That's why, probably, like you said, you have to have a strong incident commander because, the truck company might not take kindly to somebody from rescue saying, hey, listen, you got to back out, get out, we got this, So that's why that's I would say is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm sorry, it's critical that we have that control.
Yeah, especially when you're the guy in the 18-inch void, 16 feet below everybody, and the guy's doing jumping jacks on the top there.
Listen, generally, and John, you could, I think, verify this. That doesn't happen in the very beginning because your first alarm assignment's there. The engine, might be stretching a line and just in case there's a fire, there should be a charged line because you never know
Absolutely
what's going to happen. But the trucks are all over. Even the first dual rescue or squad, might be doing that quick, surface, or there could even be people that are still sliding down or in the building that you can see they may be trapped. So there's a lot of moving parts in the beginning. Once the obvious victims have been removed, at that point, then the incident commander has to take charge. And that doesn't mean that only the special ops companies are going to be working, but it means that he's got to decide where he's going to deploy, those companies. When it gets to the point where he needs guys that with the special training, that's when he's going to say, "All right, you're going to pull the reins and say, this is how we're going to do this."
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the first alarm companies at an explosion like that or any kind of major collapse, there's a million things that they're going to be doing initially. Like I said, like Hank just said, you've got to have hose lines stretched to cover the entire perimeter. A fire can ignite from broken gas lines, from broken electrical wires,
flammable liquids that have spilled or and reach an ignition point. So there's a lot.
Your first alarm engine companies are going to be tied up. If there's fire, forget it. All your first alarm engine companies are tied up. Now your second alarm engine companies might be the ones doing the surface victim removal, might be doing the patient removal. And then we got to worry about things like that. That's that Third Avenue explosion. That's a 4-story section of wall that is hanging over the entire scene. Can we stabilize it? No, not really. Not at this stage. So we need to keep people out of the way there. Right. You see, there's a battalion chief in the back, just taking an eye on it. We actually put a tower ladder up there, and then later on we had a transit to monitor it for movement. But when we say this area is off limits, it's because of a reason. You don't want anybody in underneath there until we can stabilize it, if we can.
One thing that you didn't mention, Chief, when you're going in, before you make searches in those voids, not that I'm a big hazmat geek, but
metering.
Would you meter in those places before you go in there?
Absolutely. You're going into an area that's, it's a confined space now. You can't get out in a hurry. So you'd better make sure that there's nothing deadly inside there, whether it's a gas leak, or, like Hank just pointed out, stuff that's already stored there, commercial occupancy, garages, poisons, you name it. So, but that's one of the, primary. In Rescue 1, we had a meter assignment. One guy was designated as the meter man for the tour. So if you go into collapse, you go into a confined space, that's what he brought with him.
Right. But you know what? Even then, again, these collapses that we're talking about tonight, these all occurred before we got the nice, battery, explosive meters and stuff.
Yeah, the 3-in-1 meters.
With the old MSAs, when you put the filter, you had, whichever filter you were putting in, and you had the squeeze bulb with the wand.
Or the canary.
Or the canary, right.
The Proby.
Unless Hazmat was there, they had more sophisticated meters than the rescues did at that point. But, a lot of it was, wing and a prayer at some of these things. If there was, fumes or something detected, they might have somebody. All right, we're going to take readings, but the more sophisticated equipment made it easier later on at collapses because you just you could have it on your shoulder, you turn it on and move it as you're going. But like you say, it's a lot more sophisticated. now. If you want, I mean, I'm jumping in here, but if you want, I'll give you, because Kevin, you were talking about like perspective on who's doing what. And I also responded to this job. I had about 9 months in Rescue 1. We responded in here as the second rescue. And when we got there, the officer reported into the chief, and obviously the chief was getting reports from Rescue 3, what he needed and how we could, supplement Rescue 3. And it was pretty much a lot of the voids had already been gone through. I think 2 of the senior men from 1 were assigned, and they had started they were doing voids. But at some point, there were still people missing, and it was decided that we were going to have to tunnel. So me, as one of the junior guys, and it was actually another guy that was junior to me, Donnie Salicito, he came to Rescue 1, but I don't remember if he was in 1 at the time or he was a detail from Fort Truck, because he was coming over to the company, so he might have taken a detail. I don't remember. But as the junior guys, it was with the radios, we were the gophers. I remember like getting again, we didn't have the battery powered tools then, so it was get the generator, make sure you have the spare fuel, all the electric wire, you have all the extension cords, bring in the sawzall, some of the timbers we had to bring a big worm drive saw that we had to cut some of the 4x4s. So that's as a new guy in the rescue, coming in as the second new rescue, the first part of my exposure there was the gopher and getting stuff set up. And then at some point, the guys inside were calling, all right, cut me, a 4x4 to 18 inches, cut me some wedges. And, Donnie and I would be cutting and, finding what we could and handing that stuff down to them where they were tunneling. And, so that was, later on, we were able to go in and, we had to switch out. But as a new guy in a rescue company, that's, pulling up to that scene with 9 months in the rescue, this was my first building collapse. And it was pretty overwhelming. There was a lot to do, but I mean, we got it done.
Let me ask you another question. You saw what happened with the explosion to one building did to the other building. Would you call buildings, or who would you rely on to check the stability of exposure 4, exposure 2? Who
John, you want to answer that?
Well, at the time, it was the Department of Buildings. Now, with our own resources, we have engineers within our FEMA task force. The fire department has structural engineers who have been to training through FEMA. They are better off. They are far better at it than the Department of Buildings. Department of Buildings knows all about buildings going up in the way they're supposed to be.
Codes,
The FEMA people are trained on what to look at after a disaster, earthquakes, after buildings have been heavily damaged. So guys like Steve Spall in Squad 61, Captain Spall, he was one of the structural engineers on our USAR task force. I would, certainly look to have them respond, even if they're off duty, call them in from home, because they are a wealth of knowledge. And we have others too. But like Hank said, we have to analyze the situation and decide where can we go, what's dangerous.
Right.
And a quick story. It was actually a fire on, I believe it was 8th Avenue. Hank, you might have been at the fire. Man, I have a picture of it. But 21 truck was first due. Heavy fire, commercial building, burned for a while. And the deputy said, this is bad. This building's going to come down. And the building's inspector said, no, that building is fine. That building's fine. It's okay. And the building fell down entirely about 20 minutes later. So, I mean, we have a lot of experience in the fire department in bad buildings. We're there when they are being destroyed. And that's always, if my gut tells me that this is bad, it's bad.
Right. Well, if you're a student of firefighting, I mean, right, you said, we're looking at how long has this building been burning? What's the construction? Is it heavy timber, or is it light, is it metal truss? are the mortar seams pushing smoke? Well, we're trained to look for this stuff. Where the building department guys, I'm sure I'm not going to make too many friends, but in the building department, but I would go with our guys before.
At what point does that become a priority? Because you have so much shit going on. At what point does somebody, not have the tunnel vision and look around and say, we need to get these other buildings?
That has to be very early on.
Right.
Yeah, that's part of your size up. You're analyzing threats very early on. If you see secondary collapse threats, the Widowmakers, you gotta pick them up like that. Gas leaks, all those issues. That's got to be high priority to protect your people.
Right. So would you say that's the incident commander, or would you give him a little tickle if he hasn't had that coming?
Well, yeah, the incident commander is ultimately responsible for it, and they've gotten training on it, but they're not as good at it because they haven't the experience as your rescue officer. I mean, the good chiefs in our job know that resource is there for them. That is the most experienced guy on the first alarm in those terms. And they know to use that guy. It's a great resource. Mm-hmm. Later on, now you got the SOC battalion coming in.
Right. I was going to say,
you got a lot of resources within our organization that most other places are never going to have.
Right.
But the incident commander's got to be looking for those things initially.
Go ahead, Hank. What were you going to say? You were going to say something.
No, John said, don't forget, you got, just like when 13 David started, then it evolved into SOC, and then you got the SOC chief coming in. That's basically the guy that's, he's concerned with his units, but he's also going to make sure that, and he's going to help the incident commander, to make sure all these things are in place. Because he knows what he's looking for.
One of the things that we developed back in, 2003, 2004, somewhere around there, is we have a checklist for a structural collapse. For every battalion chief is issued a pad with different checklists now. A confined space checklist, building collapse checklist, a number of different checklists that get them thinking about, what do I have to deal with? What are my dangers here? That, hey, I've never had a collapse before in my life, and now I'm the boss in charge of this disaster here. So that checklist is there just to, it's not you go down and, okay, did I do this? Did I do that? No, but a quick scan is going to point out things like, overhanging objects, things are going to
I didn't know that.
Fall out from underneath you.
Right.
So it gets them thinking.
I thought one of the best things that they did was when they started sending the division and the battalion chiefs through an abbreviated course of rescue operations. That had to be hands down one of the best things, man.
I remember that too.
Yeah, because it gets them to see what they have coming.
We have a short segment to give them awareness at the flips now. Lieutenants and captains. Lieutenants, get an exposure. In the battalion chief's command course, they get exposure to each of these subjects. It's not going to make them an expert, but okay, it gets them thinking and tells them what resources are available to them. So, yeah.
I think that was the most important thing, Chief, to be honest, was after that program where the chiefs started to realize, because even as a boss myself, showing up as a squad, and I'd say, Chief, we could do this, this, and this. And sometimes the chief would be like, you could do what? Like he had no idea that we had the capability of doing something out of the box that he's never seen before. And I think that started, like you were just saying, where the chiefs came down to the classes, and this way they could say, all right, the rescue of the squad, we could do something here, or they could be more trustful if they had to go that way, right?
We used to have Chief DiBernardo, Joe DiBernardo Sr., used to go through the rescue school. When we did a trench class, he would be in there as a student, not an observer. He wanted to be a student. I said, Chief, you don't have to do this. Come on, you don't have to get down in the mud. He wanted to be part of it, Now, we don't do that for every chief, but, and that was his point. When you guys show up at one of my incidents, I have to know when you say we can do this, they can do it.
Right. Somebody in the chat wanted to know about the different types of, there you go, collapses, and are some more difficult than others.
Hank, you want to take that?
Well, I don't know. Go ahead, John. You can go first.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, wood frame building collapses, they're a dime a dozen. We can do that. Your first alarm ladder company is going to make a huge impact there. Power saws, that's, light debris. You start getting into unreinforced masonry, the buildings that we're looking at there on 3rd Avenue, it gets a little more complicated. When you start getting into earthquake-caused collapses of high-rise structures, that's a whole nother league. That's where the FEMA USAR task forces are deployed. That's what they're for. And when we got to the World Trade Center, we, including the FEMA USAR task forces, were not prepared. We were not anywhere near prepared to lift that kind of heavy steel, to cut that kind of heavy steel. We had prepared everything based on history, which was pretty much concrete collapses at earthquakes. That's what we were set up for. We could cut concrete and move and break concrete, but when we started hitting these 50-ton pieces of steel, 50, 100 feet long, we weren't able to move that stuff. We were unprepared. So, yeah, you got to look at your response area. You got to look at the types of structures in your response area and be prepared for the best you can for that.
Yeah. What about, Hank, what about as far as pancake collapse as opposed to a lean-to collapse?
That's what I was going to say is that, when you're talking about the World Trade Center, that's a totally, and even now, John, you correct me if I'm wrong, I'm out a while, but even with the FEMA team, you got a 50-foot I-beam that's 12 inches or whatever. You're still, without calling in equipment, you're not doing anything with that.
We're not doing anything there, absolutely.
As far as let's call it I don't want to say the everyday collapse, but the collapses that are caused by the undermining or the weather or something. Like you said, the wood frame, the 3-story wood frame or something that's pretty much a walk in the park at this point. To me,
well, it's a walk in the park for us, Hank. For a department that's never faced it before, this is going to be a major, major problem for them.
Okay,
but they could handle it with resources that are available locally.
Right. That's what I'm alluding to. But to me personally, like I would think the taller the building, like if you had a 6 or an 8-story building that maybe lean-to, and now you still have a portion of the roof and part of a wall hanging over you. To me,
like on 31st Street.
Well, something right. Where it's precarious, where you're putting people in harm's way, but there's no other way of getting it done at that point. Right. Those collapses. A pancake collapse, everything's down. So, the searching might be tougher because everything is collapsed onto one another. But as far as secondary stuff, there might not be as much of a hazard. So, right. And again, if it's a building that maybe has a combination, you got brick and mortar with some steel joists and stuff. To me, any of that stuff that's hanging or can cause secondary, those collapses were always, to me, the more precarious ones to operate in.
Yeah, widow makers.
Right.
That's what they're called.
Right.
For a reason.
Right. And that's when again, we weren't really going to talk the World Trade Center, but I think you alluded to it in the book, but that's true. I remember going in the second and third day, you were walking into areas where there was, like, you just looked up and you said, all right, well, today might be the day, because there was just stuff hanging that nobody could do anything with. And there was still fires burning, and you were working in areas where there was stuff hanging above you. And,
what made a big difference? there, Hank, was when those grapplers came in. Those guys did some
Right, but that was
unbelievable.
like I said, that wasn't in the first 2 or 3
No,
days. You
no,
know,
you're right.
You know, we had spotters and stuff, but even by the time you yell "look out" or something, where you had no place to go. So
Nah.
you know, I mean, but that was a totally different, you know, from the type of collapses we're talking about tonight.
Yeah,
which would be,
like you say, the normal collapse. We're not talking the high-rise disaster. We're talking, you know, the undermining, the old age, the high wind collapses,
the vibrations from the train, whatever it is. You know.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So.
There's other things you could add in the mix too. Like let's talk about Atlantic Avenue, where there's fire and the brothers inside. That's a whole nother. That's
toughest. I was friends with the 3 chiefs that had that incident. Primary chiefs with Eddie Kilduff and Tommy Galvin and Frank Carruthers, and that was the toughest thing for all of them to decide to commit additional resources. You got 5 guys buried, some of them burning and still conscious and screaming, and you have massive secondary collapses occurring around them. 100-pound radiators falling 3 stories, landing right in the middle of where a rescue operation is going to take place. And do you commit additional resources or do you cut your losses? And that was the hardest decision that they ever had to face.
Yep. All right, Hank, you want to move on to 31st Street?
Well, are you done, John? With what? I mean,
we'll talk more. We'll keep going.
We have some more pictures because we actually got the guy out alive.
Oh yeah, no, we got 2 guys. Well, if you go to that hand-drawn picture there, Bob, there were 2 guys buried alive in that debris, and Nicky Giordano and actually Harry Christensen was crawling in. They heard a guy calling, and that's one of the techniques. Again, I mentioned it a bit ago. I think you got to call for absolute silence. You're going into a void space here. We're looking for somebody. You don't need somebody banging on the perimeter because he wants to do something. Right. Everybody shut up, stop banging.
Shut the saws down.
We want to listen and listen. And hey, is everybody in here? And the guy calls out and says, yeah, come get me. So they started crawling in, and Harry was crawling in, and all of a sudden he knew the voice was still ahead of him, and something reaches out and grabs his hand, like Tales from the Crypt. Grabs his arm as he's crawling along. Scared the hell out of him. It was another victim who couldn't speak, but he could sense the movement, and he was able to get his arm free and reached out and grabbed Harry. So that was the first guy. I believe his name was Luna, and now all of a sudden, okay, we got a live victim here. And Nicky Giordano kept crawling toward the first voice that they actually heard and was able to establish contact with them, found another live victim. And these guys are buried under, 6 feet of mixed rubble. So it took about an hour to free the first guy. And that's the guy that you are bringing out. Rescue 1 has the guy in the Stokes basket. Right. Is that Emilio Landa? Or I think it's Landa. Let me just look at this.
I don't remember his name.
Pull it back up, Bob. There you go.
Yeah. No, the first guy was Emilio Landa. And that's the guy in the Stokes basket that Hank is actually part of the unit bringing him out. That took about an hour and a half. He was, pinned under a bunch of loose rubble. But when I say rubble, we're talking 100 or 200-pound fieldstone, blocks that used to be part of the foundation wall. And that all had to be moved by hand. So you're moving a 100 or 200-pound block when you are in a void that's 2 feet high and maybe 4 feet wide. So you got no leverage. You can't get any heavy lifting equipment in there. You got no high point. This is sheer bulwark and determination.
Does Bob have the picture? Hey, Bob, you got the picture where there's like it's
bringing a guy out in the Stokes basket.
How long into the operation did you find him?
We probably found him in the first 45 minutes or so. Yeah, first half hour, I would say.
So,
but to get him out now took about another hour. So yeah, I think it's 3rd Avenue 8. There we go. And there's Hank himself.
Yeah, with the 132, that's my back. But if you look to the right, you see Al Fuentes.
Yeah,
he was down in the hole. That was actually
Al's
the roof.
in the
That
opening.
was like you made a roof cut in to get. And that guy, he came out with the Stokes that way, and we got him over to the ambulance.
So you had to go down and then into the void that way, Hank?
Oh yeah.
I wasn't in the void at that time, but yeah, they tunneled down. Down to.
Well, they cut their way in. Yeah, I was inside the void, pushing them up to to Al. That's actually on the first floor level, kind of. So it's down a couple of feet from where the roof is cut. But then below that, about 8 feet down further, is the cellar where the next guy is. So,
wow.
Now we know where 2 of them are. But getting through where Nicky is, Nicky can barely touch the guy's fingers. He's down to a 12-inch high void, and he can barely touch the guy's fingers. And it's solid debris. So what we did, Tommy, I believe, was working in the TAC unit that day. Tommy took a tape measure and he passed it in, and he stayed where Al Fuentes is there. And he passed the tape in to Nicky. They carry it in and they measure out, and it's 22 feet from where Tommy's standing to where the guy is. Now, the guy's pinned by steel I-beams, tons and tons of debris. Tunneling in is not practical. So they take the tape measure. Tommy stays where he is, and he passes it up on the top of the hole. And he says 22 feet out, and he shows us where the angle is, where the angle matches where he was looking at Nicky. And that's where we started sinking a shaft there from the top down. So we cut through the multiple layers of debris. It's a huge project. You got to change tools depending on what you're cutting through. First, you're cutting through steel plating. We go through like a dozen metal cutting saws. Then we hit the roof deck. So now we're cutting through the roof with circular saws, and then we got to use chainsaws to cut the timbers, 3x12 joists, the roof joists. Now you hit the mixed debris, you hit the brick, the rubble, so you can't use the chainsaw anymore. Now we got to scoop all that by hand. Now you hit the next floor, cut that with the circular saws. But now we got to know that you can't cut through debris without knowing what's on the other side of it, because this guy's back is laying flat, pinned against debris. If we take the chainsaw and plunge through that,
you plunge it through his back.
Yeah, you could just cut the guy in half. So it's a very, again, labor-intensive, time-consuming operation. We're cutting small holes, drilling holes down, and then peering through, taking a wire coat hanger, poking it through the hole and rotating it to see if there's anything within our radius there. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and expand the opening. And we kept doing that layer after layer after layer. Now, Nicky can see that the guy is pinned by a metal ceiling. So we know when we hit a metal ceiling, you got to stop. And then that gets done by hand. We're using tin snips to cut through the metal ceiling. When we cut the first hole, the first tunnel the shaft that we dug down, we came out right on his belt buckle. That's how close we were.
How many feet down was it, Chief?
Oh, it was about 6 feet of debris.
Oh my God.
Mixed debris. It's 4 floors on top of this guy. So there's the roof. There's, like I say, 4 separate floor sections, and he was in the cellar. So now there's like six levels there. with, like I said,
Contents.
brick blowing out in between it. Yeah, exactly. The store contents. So yeah, it's a very labor-intensive operation. It took us about 2.5 hours to locate him, where actually I was the first guy lowered. They had to lower me down head first because I was the skinniest guy at the time. They put me down in there, and I see that, yeah, he's here, and now he's clear, and we could start working with bigger tools, and we could expand the opening. And now that's when we started going. We created about a 6 foot by 6 foot wide opening through all that debris to get him to where we can lift him out. And that took about 3 more hours. By that point, the night shift of both Rescue 1, Rescue 3, and Rescue 4 are on scene. The day shift stayed on scene. So we got like basically 6 units worth of rescue guys on scene. And it still took 6 hours to get him out. And the last picture, I think, is 3rd Avenue, number 9. There's another valuable lesson there. You see that picture? It's the front page of one of the newspapers. I think that's the, no, 3rd Avenue 9. It's a color picture, Bob. But one of the problems that you have, it collapses, especially long-term there. That's when we're bringing the last victim out there, the last live victim out. You see there's an IV bag hanging. When a person has been pinned in a fashion like that, we have specialized collapse medicine needs that have to be met. It's what's called crush syndrome. If you know how your arm falls asleep if you sleep the wrong way, you get pins and needles. Well, it's pins and needles on steroids. Your arm or your leg is cut off. There's no circulation, and the cells inside your extremities actually start to die, and they produce a toxic acidic product that is now trapped inside your arm by the leg, by the debris. You need that paramedic to be able to start an IV that can counteract that. Am I still there?
You are. We're listening.
Okay. You're listening to your story like what?
Okay, all I saw was the picture of him. So what came out of that, we now understand that lactic acid buildup in the arm. That's enough to kill you. When you lift the weight off of that extremity, whether it's an arm or a leg, all of a sudden that stuff that's been trapped in that area for the last 4, 5, 6 hours now flushes back into your circulation. And when it hits the heart, it causes an arrhythmia that'll kill you like that. And it's called the smiling death because this guy's been pinned in there. He's been thinking he's going to die for the last 4 or 5 hours. And when you finally lift him out, he's happy as hell. He thinks, okay, I'm done. And all of a sudden he drops dead from the heart attack from this arrhythmia that killed him. So that's one of the reasons why we established the Rescue Medic program. At that collapse there, we wanted to get the medics into the hole, and it was too dangerous for them. They did not have protective clothing. They had never operated in that environment. So again, after 2001, after I became the boss there in SOC, myself and John Perugia, the chief of EMS operations, we established the Rescue Medic program. So there are medics on duty all around the city, 24 hours a day, who have been trained in all our disciplines, our technical rescue disciplines, collapse, confined space, trench cave in. And they can go into these areas. They're equipped with protective clothing now. They can go in, work alongside our guys while we're doing the extrication, get that line going into the guy, and start pumping the drugs in there that are going to neutralize that acid that's going to kill them if we don't. So it's critical that we give that medic access to that patient as soon as they can get in there safely. And they know, all right, listen, they can't just hang a bag and expect it to just be, okay, this is where it's going to stay. We're still working to free this guy, cutting stuff out of the way. So they know how we work, and now our guys are getting used to working with them, and it's paid big dividends.
Hey, Coobs, I wanted to watch that feedback. McVeigh sent me a text that he was a cop at this. When he came on, he's like, well, you guys talking about 31st Street? So what the chief said earlier was that the people who were first on the scene. So he sent me a news clipping that I don't know if you could read it. I could read it here. Him and his partner ended up taking two people that were like covered. Well, let me see here if I could read it. Roll call of heroes begins with officers Mike McVeigh and Joe White of Midtown South who were on patrol in the Garment District and were on scene as the building crashed down. We got two people out right away and just kept digging, White said, but the digging had to stop. What was left of the building was leaning precariously. The call went out for Dwyer, 50, master crane operator, blah, blah, blah. So basically,
that's the 31st Street collapse you're talking about.
Yeah.
Wow, look at McVeigh making grabs early on before he's a fireman. Is that right? Chief,
people out of that Third Avenue collapse as well. Those lightly buried victims. That's something to give them to do. Yeah, if there's somebody that's just covered by a couple of 2x4s or a sheet of plywood, anybody can pull them out. Get them out of the way. Why don't we go to that 31st Street collapse?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a question. What were the extent of the injuries to those two guys?
Yeah, they were banged up bad. The second guy, Luna, that I worked most closely with, he was from the waist down. I mean, multiple compound fractures. He was banged up bad. From the waist up, he wasn't too bad, but he had no circulation, no movement in the leg. His leg was broken and wrapped around an I-beam. I mean, he was in bad shape.
But they
both survived.
Right. And after them, there was still another victim that was found dead later on.
Yeah, well, there were two people burying his legs. Actually, they were wrapped around his legs.
I remember, I think at one point, Bruce Newberry had gotten in there, and I'm pretty sure it was Bruce. Did you lose me here, or am I still on?
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
Hello?
You're there.
You're on.
You're on.
I'm seeing everybody else frozen, so...
Good.
So Bruce was down there, and like John, you said earlier, everything's gray. And I remember he was like in a horizontal position, and he looked one way in this void, and then he turned another way, and he said there was just a pair of eyes looking at him, and it was like that was pucker time. That was the guy. He was dead, but everything was gray except his eyes were open, and like Bruce's face was a few inches from him. Ew. So they ended up, he was located, and it took long. There wasn't as much urgency to get that person out at that point.
Yeah, he didn't need no meds.
Right.
All right, here you go. Here's Hanky on the 31st Street collapse.
Okay, so you remember this was like 35 years ago, just like the other one. And I was telling you guys, your memory after 35 years, you got to use your cheat sheet. So between my scrapbook and my newspaper articles, unfortunately or fortunately, within that 18-month period, I had worked 3 major building collapses. The 3rd Avenue one that we just talked about, and it was Sullivan Street in Greenwich Village, and then there was the 31st Street collapse. So sometimes the stories get intermingled. So like I said, I got my three pages of cheat sheet here. So bear with me. So it was October 24th, 1988. It was 24 West 31st Street between 5th and Broadway, a block away are the quarters of 1 engine and 24 truck. So the collapse occurred around 3:30 in the afternoon. It was a 6-story building. And what caused the collapse was on the exposure 4 side, or the D side, whichever your department uses, was a parking lot. And apparently the owner of this building, which was in the Garment District, and it was being used, there was a clothing and a woman's purse making them or selling them in there. And then there was even a flea market in the building.
A lot of costume
I'm
jewelry.
assuming that maybe the basement was leaking because there was work that was getting done on the outside of exposure 4. So like I said, you had to build the wall of the exposure 4 wall, and then there was a construction crew with a backhoe, and they had dug like a 30-foot trench along the foundation wall of that building from the parking lot side. This work was being done without a permit. Nobody knew what was going on, so there's no engineering, no blueprints, no nothing. What they were doing, and this was the eyewitness who worked in the parking lot, said they were taking bricks out, and then putting bricks back in. So I guess maybe they were remortaring in bricks, and then I guess ultimately they were going to try to flash it and waterproof it. But the problem was they had taken too much of a trench, and there had also been heavy rains over the weekend, which I'm sure softened some of the soil up. And I can only assume that the static load of that 6-story bearing wall coming down pushed the foundation out. So when that foundation got pushed out, the whole exposure 4 side of the building came down, causing lean-to collapses, floors to collapse and go into that lean-to configuration. And I think, John, you had sent a couple of pictures showing that, I think, pretty clearly.
Yeah, if you have collapse 37, that was a real good illustration of that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, so what had happened was as this building came down, these are eyewitnesses that I had from the newspaper article. There was people in the building that actually rode the floors down, and a lot of them got out pretty much unscathed. They were cut up and bleeding, but from riding a six-story building down into kind of a third, the debris pile was about 3 stories high. So some of them rode it down, tumbled down, and ended up where they were able to walk away or limp away. But there was I
believe there were a couple of people still on that top floor at the front windows when the first two pulled up.
Okay. That could be, I guess, in the front, right? Because the front was pretty precarious, but that whole exposure 1 was still kind of standing there.
Yeah.
So, like I say, again, in the beginning, there was a lot of moving parts. People had to be rescued. While nothing, there was nothing in place yet for safety or secondary collapse or whatever. Some of the things that I guess had to be taken care of, and John, I'm going to let you speak on that. As far as the precautions, here you had Long Island Railroad, subway. So you want to talk about as a chief in charge, what you'd be doing?
Go ahead, Hank. Take them through what's
All right. So what happened here was that building was in an area where you have the Long Island Railroad tunnels coming underneath, going to Penn Station. So Chief had the Long Island Railroad stopped, and 8 of the different subway lines stopped, and 1 PATH train that came into, I think, the 33rd Street from Jersey stopped. So all of that train traffic stopped. And the reason was because you didn't want to have trains buzzing through 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, causing all these vibrations when you had, these freestanding walls and parts of a roof and everything just, teetering. So the incident commander had to take care of that. As the operation was getting set up, they called for a transit, which was placed on one of the walls to detect movement. I think that was the front wall, and spotters were assigned to that. Yeah, that's a really good picture to show how the lean-to occurred. So you're looking at that is the exposure 4 side. You're looking down into the building, at the building.
Hey, Hank, just a quick question. What did the building look like if you were looking at it from the front? Can you tell anything collapsed? You know what I mean?
You could, but it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't really. I mean, if the front windows, you could see it, or through the windows, you could kind of see stuff hanging down. But other than that, it was still standing. and there was still, I don't remember if it was on towards the exposure 2 side, still part of the roof that was hanging over, the collapse area. Because later on in the job, a portion of that roof did come down and it injured 2 firemen, but they weren't injured badly because the roof hit and slid down into the pile where they were working. So initially, like John had said, there was the I call it the outwash, the debris pile, which was guys were going through, lines stretched, and then I think Rescue 3 came on the initial response too, because there were a ton of voids to go in, and guys had been dispatched into the different voids initially doing primaries, and of course Johnny collapsed. Johnny O'Connell. He ended up he was sniffing it out, and he heard somebody. He got into one of the voids. Might have been like on the 3rd floor or something, and he located a guy that was pinned between a couple of file cabinets and some debris. So he got some help, and they were able to free that guy and get him out. So an eyewitness who knew the building owner, his last name was DeSantis, like the governor down here. He was the building owner. He had been seen on the roof a few minutes before the collapse occurred.
Oh shit!
So he was still missing. A girl that was up on the 6th floor was still missing. As it progressed, again, the incident command, I think Homer Bishop was chief of department. I think he might have been there at that point. I don't remember. I know he was there eventually, but whatever. Whoever took charge, said, okay, we're going to limit here, limit there. These guys are going to be doing this assignment. And, he had us, Rescue 1 and Rescue 3, doing, some of the voids and continuing to check that out. At one point, I guess whoever on the transit noticed that the front wall was starting to move. So, I think this was already maybe at least 3 hours into the operation. So they halted the whole operation, and they said, we're not going to, anybody that had been located had been removed at this point. We were still missing people, but they hadn't been located. So they brought in a small crane there, which actually took that whole front, the exposure 1 side of the building, down to, I think it was this between the 2nd and 3rd floor. So it wasn't, hanging and in the way. Once that was done, they let us go back to work. So let me see. I might be getting ahead of myself here. So,
I wanted to ask you 2 quick
things
for you. The guys who were operating the machinery that were digging out the trench, were they still there at the time, or were they?
You know what? I don't think that they were trapped, Lou. Or they might not have been there when the wall actually came down. I don't remember that. But John, do you know what happened with them?
I don't believe they were part of it. I think they beat feet right away. They knew something was going on. That's why the owner was up on the roof.
Okay.
He was looking over the edge because they say, something's getting bad here.
Maybe they heard creaking or something.
Right. Cracking. Yeah.
Because if they were in that trench, they definitely would have been trapped. It could have been, their construction, they leave at 3:30. So who knows? But but beaten feet is probably more like it. So they were gone.
Mira, ¿qué pasa? Let's get the hell out of here, man.
Exactly. All right. So now, so we go back to work, and at this point now we're probably, I don't know, 8 hours into this operation, and we're still looking for the 2 victims, the owner and the girl from the 6th floor. And at this point, all the voids had been searched. There wasn't any more tunneling or anything to do. So this just became, okay, let's try to figure out if this guy was on the roof and this girl was on the 6th floor in this debris field, using your best guess and trying to figure out from what you're seeing, what areas would they be in? So we happen to be working in an area that we thought the girl from the 6th floor would be in. So it was, I know, and at this point we had 10 guys from Rescue 1, because you had the day tour that stayed, the night tour had come in, and we had Captain O'Flaherty, who was working the up and down. So he was still the officer in charge of us. So we were kind of in two bunches, and nothing romantic. This was all like surface debris removal. We're moving stuff by hand, and if we had to cut something, we'd cut it. And I'm working. I got Eddie Garrity, who ended up being in the 9th Battalion and got killed on 9/11. But he was in 1 at the time. So he's standing next to me working, and I think Neil Fredrickson on the other side. And now it's around 11 o'clock at night. And, all of a sudden, Eddie's like, hey, I got somebody. So like we stop. I turn and I look, and I see him looking down, and I look down, and I'm like, holy shit, I think they got you, which was kind of like what happened in the Bronx.
No way.
The girl, and never made a sound, whether she couldn't talk or whatever. But and she might have been like on her last dying moments, and but when you hear the rescue was coming, maybe that little adrenaline, whatever it was,
Wow.
We had removed enough debris that at some point she reached her hand up, and I guess when she moved it, she banged into Eddie's leg and grabbed the bottom of his boot area. And sure enough, this arm came out, and we made sure that we didn't all trample on the area where she was, but we kept the distance and started digging out by hand. And then sure enough,
wow,
we got her out. And her name was Robin Fisher. She was 30 years old. She was on the 6th floor when it came down. And, we got her out and packaged her. They got her to the hospital. She ended up having 2 broken legs, and she was in critical condition, but stable. And a few months later, she was able to make her wedding. So that was the happy ending.
Wow, look at that, Hanky. Good for you.
Can I interject there, Hank?
Well, please. You might have more details than I can remember.
Well,
go ahead.
If you can go to Collapse 41, Bob, we have been very successful in the FDNY at collapses because we pay attention to detail. And I was laughing at, or kind of smirking at that story you just told, because it was very, very critical the way it turned out because of what they'd done. While that front wall was being taken down, we had fire marshals go to the hospital and interview the people from the building that survived. They had talked to everybody in the building. And we knew we're down to those last 2 people, the building owner and the woman on the 6th floor. And they couldn't pinpoint the owner other than the fact that he was on the roof. But they said Robin was at her desk. And that was her last scene point. Like last week, or Monday, we were talking about scuba operations and the importance of a last scene point. And they said, okay, what was the carpet on the floor in the area where she worked? What color was it? Well, yeah, it was this black carpet. What was around her? And it was boxes of costume jewelry in, lots of, like with the padding around it. So they looked at the debris pile.
That's right. That's, not to cut you off, John, but that was a very important point that I left out. When we started removing the debris, there was a lot of padding and soft foam and stuff around her. And apparently she was in an area of that 6th floor where this stuff was stored, where they padded jewelry boxes and stuff. So that kind of encapsulated her somewhat when all this debris fell on top of her.
Chief, what picture did you want? He doesn't have 40. He didn't have the 41 label. He wanted to know what it was exactly.
041. Okay.
What's the picture of?
It's the floor looking toward the back of the building. But that or 032, either are good. But the point is, again, doing your homework, looking at the floor, looking at the direction the debris pile sloped, finding out what was in the vicinity. Again, looking at, there we go. That's the one. It was pretty obvious that everything at the bottom was going to end up in that debris pile. Now they started looking for the boxes with the costume jewelry and the packaging and started heading in that direction. Because now, again, we'd had a couple of hours to sit and look at, the debris pile while they're taking the front wall down. As soon as they were, Hank, how long was it after you went back in there that you found them?
All right. Kevin,
Brian told me it wasn't 15 minutes.
Yeah, we're here.
How long after you went back, Hank, did you find the woman? How long after you guys went back to work did you find the woman?
Oh God, I think it was a couple of hours. After they let us go back to work, it wasn't right away.
No, okay. I thought Brian told me it was 15 minutes.
I don't know what, John. Like
Again,
I said,
it's a long
35
time
years
ago.
ago. You know what? It might have seemed like a couple hours, but
Did you think that did you think you were going to find somebody at that point? Did you really think you were going to find
thought we
somebody
were going to
alive?
find somebody. We didn't know whether we were going to find somebody alive.
Right.
I mean, and the owner was found a little right after that, but he was dead. So, but listen, that's what drives us. The chance that, if there's still a chance that there's somebody alive, and,
No doubt.
that's what keeps you going. When it's like, when you're like, if you get this is worthless, then, you're in the wrong business. So,
No doubt.
How far away was the owner?
you know what? I don't remember because we worked that area. Then we got her packaged and got her out to the ambulance, and there were guys working, in another area. I mean, it wasn't that far off from that whole debris field because that's all that was left was that kind of that outwash.
You get an invite to the wedding?
no, we didn't. I believe we got like a thank you letter and stuff, but no invite to the wedding.
Did you get a medal?
No, there was no medal. I think we got a unit citation. I think, I don't know. Maybe Johnny collapsed it. I'm not sure, but it was a group effort. Everybody, we got a unit citation for the work we did. It was nice. I also said just as another point, because we got time, right? In between the 3rd Street collapse in the Bronx and this collapse, on November 11th, 1987, there was a collapse on Sullivan Street in the Village. And I happen to be the fortunate or unfortunate one to be working for that. But the reason I bring it up was because that was a collapse of an occupied, I think this is that picture, right, John? You had it?
Yeah.
Or no? Yeah. So this was an occupied building. This was actually the home that Mayor LaGuardia was born in New York, and then his parents moved away, and then he came back, and he was the mayor for like 3 terms. But so I think it had some historic value at that point. But again, there was unpermitted renovations going on here, and something they did caused this building to collapse. And I think there were a couple of people trapped in the back. That 9 truck, who was either first or second dude, they got them out on the initial alarm, and I know later on, we got there, and I think Spanky and I located a woman who was trapped in what was a 3rd floor bathroom, and we got help, and we were able to get her out alive. But so there was like 2 collapses within months of each other that had people trapped, and it was caused by unpermitted work going on. So.
Cool, you know what you got to
Busy
do.
little time for the fire department with building collapses and people trapped.
1987. Don't work with Hank during. You were going to a collapse. That's for shit sure.
Yeah. Sometimes you're the black cloud, and sometimes you're the
no
white
doubt
cloud.
about that. That's crazy.
So that was yet another.
You're muted, Coob.
That happened. All righty. So.
Oh, there we go. I'm back.
I can hear you.
I want to clear my throat. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, any last thoughts before I'm going to surprise you again with an old school tip of the day for collapse? What, Chief? Any last thoughts on collapse? Before we do the old school tip?
Well, when we were go back to that 31st Street collapse again, you know, the incident commander has to make, you know, tough decisions. And Hank talked about it, you know. They had been through all these voids, thoroughly searched them, and can't find the two missing people. And you're deploying all your resources, your listening devices, your cameras, and everything. Now you got to weigh the risk versus the benefit here. You saw that freestanding wall, those widowmakers hanging over everybody's head. They made a decision. Okay, we'll bring in the heavy equipment there. But they did that after carefully evaluating what are the chances of finding survivors. And guess what? You know what? This time they were wrong. They had the best crane operator they could find. Brought him in there and picked that front wall apart without dropping any debris in on the rest of the pile. Right. So they gave the people in the pile the best chance of survival possible, weighing the risk to firefighters, searchers in that area. And that's what the, you know, incident commander has to make that decision. Can we safely risk our people in there, or is it time to call a halt and pull people back, make it safer, and then go back in and continue? And then we get into that final, you know, general debris removal phase. Even after they took those two people out, they still did a general debris removal right down to the foundation. Why? Because the mailman could have been in there.
Right.
People that we don't know about, you know, homeless people could have been living in there, or, you know, in the vicinity that nobody knows about. So we're still going to do the general debris removal phase, even after we're pretty sure we got everybody. We don't know for positive that we got them all.
Right. Yeah, maybe the owner was up on the roof, you know, with the Gumata. Maybe he wasn't looking over the side. You never know, you know? So he was up checking the stability.
On that being said, I don't know if you want to consider this a tip or just,
Wait,
I'm just adding it in. But
ready for a hot tip of the day? You have another one.
Well, it is. I mean, this is specific to collapse.
All right,
so however you want to label it, it is what it is. As the incident commander or the SOC chief, or whether it's in your small department, you're the officer in charge. If you're faced with something like, you know, an incident like this, or it could be a confined space with somebody halfway buried in the sand or whatever, know what resources are available to you in your department, but outside your department. Because many times, just like at the trade center, here, the operating engineers were part of it. So if you think that you see that wall leaning, and at some point you might be thinking about taking that down, don't wait until, all right, I want to take it down now. Start getting your people. I might need a crane here. Let's get one started. Find me the best operator you got. You know, get the wheels in motion. Same thing, like I said, the confined space. A lot of times these VACTA trucks, like sanitation, Con Ed, you know, you might want to start one of them out. Say, I'm going to need a VACTA here. So, because sometimes that outside help might be the missing piece of the puzzle for the successful end to your operation.
You shot your wad there. That's your old school tip of the day.
Whatever. Like I said, label it, don't label it. It's just, you know me, I like giving a teaching point. So if somebody learns something.
There we go.
There you go. All right, old school tip of the day. You don't have the music anyway, so what's the difference?
The old school tip of the day.
I noticed you call me back the 2 times when you got no sound effects, no music. I'm like, you know, I'm like the old whatever. Thanks for nothing.
Wait, let me reach down. Let me reach down and hand you a tissue. Here you go, Hank.
I got your tissue.
I got your tissue for you.
It's called Shaman.
I dropped something. I don't know what I dropped. All right, do me a favor, Bob. There was a guy, Benjamin, who had a question that he really needed answered. Pull that question up, Bob. I don't want anybody to think, what the hell, that we don't answer guys' questions.
Yeah, we got time to answer a couple of questions, so go ahead.
He was hot on this question. I don't know what it was. He
tried to look at it. A few shekels.
Yeah, maybe if you use a super chat, Benny.
You'll get a chance. What about a collapse that blocked?
Egress for the interior fire attack or search crew.
What would be actions taken by the outside crew at that fire condition?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what he's talking about, but I mean, we've had collapses where now you got firemen buried, and now it's again we're back to the Atlantic Avenue collapse. I mean, a couple of them. I mean, we got to commit every available resource we can get. You got to knock the fire down. If you can't get to them one way because of collapse, we breach a wall. You go back to the Wallbaum's collapse. You know, truss roof collapse. They got 6 guys buried in there. Yeah, they breached the wall. You know, at the Astoria explosion. Yeah. You know, with you guys. You know, how do we get to
Brian? Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
Fahey.
You know, Brian Fahey. You know, we're going to do every single thing possible. We're going to get to them somehow. The question is, it's going to be in time. You're talking about breaching brick walls. It's taken a lot of time. You might be able to cut through a wood floor, cut through an exterior wall with a power saw, but you start talking about cutting through brick walls, we're talking 40 minutes, 50 minutes or more. So you can do everything you can. I mean, multiple avenues of approach. You got to try as many possible ways as you possibly can.
Right. Don't think one-dimensional. Just like when you're searching, your interior team may be trying to get up to the 2nd floor, but while they're doing that, the exterior team should be, you know, looking to get to that 2nd floor, you know, through ladders and stuff. So don't get caught in that one-dimensional, you know, with the blinders on. And if you're talking about not having firemen trapped, you're advancing a line and a collapse has occurred. Well, why did that collapse occur? Obviously, the building is not in that good stability. So at that point, you got to decide, you know what, it may be time to be backing that line out, or whether you're going out all the way or taking a defensive position, backing out some and letting the incident commander know, hey, we're going to have to hit this fire from a different side. You know, I mean,
if there's nobody at, you know, risk now, get out of the way. When you start having collapses, it's time to get out of the way.
Right.
Amen. There we go. We answered Benny's question. I feel better. Well, I want to thank the both of you for coming on tonight. Great show, great information. I'm sure.
I don't think I ever heard anything about those collapses in depth like that.
Nope.
To be honest.
Nope.
You know, I was thinking the whole time.
Why I'm so good looking?
I was thinking that, and then I was thinking 87, 88. We were 20 years old, living in the city. There was 3 collapses, major collapses. I don't even think I would know anything about it. You know what I mean? Like,
dude, you were too busy with the Guido hairdo.
But I was getting on the job.
Women
weaken knees.
Yeah, you know what I mean? They made you weak in the knees, bro. You didn't care what was going on. Freaking Martians could have landed on the earth. You didn't care, bro. You're like, where am I going tonight? Oh,
what? What Martians? What? Wait, what?
If you remember in the beginning of the show, we had mentioned it, and even in the pre-show, that there are a lot of building collapses that occur in you know, at least we know in the 5 boroughs. And if you know, if you're outside the 5 boroughs, you don't even know about it. And if you're 20 years old in the 5 boroughs, you don't even know about it.
And I was getting on the job in a couple of years.
Yeah. You were too busy.
Listen, if you're in another borough sometimes as a fireman, you don't know.
Yeah, you don't even know what's going on. That's true, Chief. That is true.
You know what struck me is when the chief said, what'd you say, 500 collapses across the country and 100 of them are in New York? Mm-hmm. That's a lot. And if you're working with Hank, you go into all of them.
Buildings, black clouds.
Listen, we got more collapses we could talk about on another show. You know, I didn't want to go.
We're going to have another show. Absolutely, bro. Absolutely.
We got plenty of collapses. That's right.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? We did the old school tip of the day. Bob, we got to do the old school health and safety tip of the day. Go ahead. Throw it up there, fella. Let me find my old school health and safety shit. I can't find what I did with it. Holy crap. Look at me. I'm remiss. I don't have it. Oh, here we do. Hold on a minute. First, there we go. Now we got it. The First Responder Center for Excellence is not a non-for-profit organization dedicated to protecting the lives and livelihood of first responders. Their education and research initiatives aim to bring greater awareness and understanding to the challenges to the health and safety and well-being of firefighters, EMS personnel, and other first responders. The goal is to reduce line-of-duty injuries and deaths, as well as occupational illnesses. They are an affiliation of the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. And if you want to know more about it, hit that QR code up there with your phone. Ruffy tried it, right, Ruff?
It
Brings
works.
you right to the page.
It does bring you right to the website.
Yes. And let me grab the old school tip. Stand by, please. Oh, here we go. There's one. We're getting new ones, by the way. They're sending us. I talked to Frank Lieb. We say this all the time. This ain't the job that you used to be on, guys. This is everything is clean now, and you got to stay healthy. Regularly clean the bottom of your bunker boots. This minimizes the spread of fireground and other contaminants to reduce your risk of occupational illness. You may have heard clean is the new salty. Look at that. Clean is the new salty, Roof. Getting salty or being salty is today a knowledgeable firefighter into the job worth his salt. Be aggressive on scene firefighting the fire and be just as aggressive cleaning your gear, equipment, and yourself after a fire. We must protect our greatest resources, our firefighters. So, Hank, wash those knee-high boots, will you, when you get home?
Yeah, well, like I said, the ship has sailed for me, Kev. I agree with everything they're saying. And
it is true, man.
It is true. Like I said, it's tough to teach the old dog new tricks. I'm not crawling down the hallways anymore. So, but listen to Chief Lieb and Safety Battalion, and you're doing it for the protection of your family, your kids. You don't want to be bringing contaminants home.
As soon as you retire, the only thing you're going to be worrying about is cancer,
live longer?
bro. That's it.
Yeah.
Every morning I get up, I'm like, my back.
Cancer?
Holy shit, man! Is that my pancreas? Holy God!
Yeah.
30 years ago, I was washing my hood out, and I don't know what made me do it the first time. It's just something. And I washed my hood out, and I couldn't believe the crap that came out of it.
Yeah.
And now think about that. Where is that?
On your skin, your biggest organ, right?
Yeah. Well, they're saying that's a big part of the thyroid cancer now.
Yeah,
man.
And I said, holy shit. The first time I did it, now I started making a point of it, doing it.
Yeah.
Not every run, not every fire even, but maybe once a month. I mean, but before that, I never did it.
Yeah.
Nobody ever done. The dirtier it was, the better. No doubt.
Yeah. Hank used to clean the tools with his hood back in the day. Right, Hank?
Used to clean the windshield.
No comment. Are we doing the? Are you gonna ask us for an old school tip of the day or no?
You want one? You got one in the chute?
I'm sure Chief Norman wants to say something. And
all right, hold on a minute. Here comes Hank.
Okay, it's taken 2 seconds. I'm a broken record. I said this Tuesday night. I've said it before, and I'm saying it right now. You can never learn too much about a job that can kill you. So be a student of the job. Learn your tactics, your procedures. Learn building construction. Anything that you're going to be involved in. The time to learn it is before you get to the incident. Not when you get there saying, I should have learned about this before I got here. Because it is a very dangerous job. When you're doing everything right, you can get killed. You want to keep the odds in your favor because it's still a dangerous job when you do everything right. That's it.
Amen.
You got one, Chief, or you want to?
I have one old school tip of the day.
Hold on a second.
You
can't go without it. Hold on a second.
It's a plug. I do an Instagram post every day that is meant to be a training tip every day. So if you want an old school tip of the day for every single day, go to my Instagram account. It's Chief Norman FDNY or at Chief Norman FDNY on Instagram. And Some days it'll be about collapse. Some days it'll be about engine operations. Some days it'll be about truck operations. You name it. Building construction. So Hank just took the words out of my mouth. But the best way to educate yourself is constantly be into the job. So I'm trying to do my little bit to help.
Get on that Instagram page, you pikers. All right, Ruffy, you got anything?
I got nothing. Well, we wanted to mention Gilly, correct?
Line of duty death. Yes, go ahead.
Bob, you got that pick? So it's Tommy McDougal. When I was in 117, he was a firefighter there. I think he ended up staying there his whole career, if I remember right. He lived on Coob's block.
Lived across the street from me.
Lived across the street from him. So
Gilly.
Great guy, man. Funny guy. You know, as you can even see in the picture, always laughing, always fooling around. He liked to partake occasionally, you might
now
say.
and then. Yep.
Fucking Gilly.
Fucking Gilly.
They used to call him Gilly. So
today
today
we're going to give Gilly the $5. We got another guy?
Negative.
Not negative. All right, we're going to give Gilly the $5. That was a line of duty death. Rest in peace, Gilly.
Yeah, today was his the wake, and tomorrow's the funeral. Our Lady Miraculous Medal.
Oh, Mike's saying rest in peace, Lieutenant Hugh Barry O'Connell out of 107. All right, same to him. Rest in peace. All right, guys. Roof, we don't know if we have a show on. Our guest canceled on Monday, right?
He couldn't make it on Monday now, so we'll go to the bullpen. We'll figure something out.
Yeah. Yep. All right, Chief Hank, thank you so much. Great
awesome job. Enjoyed it.
Gentlemen.
Learned a lot.
Pleasure.
Come out to Indy. Louis is going to buy you dinner, Chief. He'll be more than happy.
I don't cramp, Chief. I don't
You don't cramp. Hank will be with his new knee, so he doesn't know if he can make it. But
good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck.
Man. You know, why don't you bring your scooter? Come out on a scooter, bro. We'll push you around.
Be doing the Lindy.
I'm too cheap to buy one. You think Chief Steve will lend me his?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, man. I was gonna put a siren and lights on his, bro. You know.
We'll send it down. All one. We'll paint the blue lights.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, fellas. Thanks. And also thanks for doing a great job. Is producer Bob? Producer Bob.
Well, thanks again for having me. Twice in 1 week. They're gonna get tired of seeing me, but I appreciate the opportunity.
Never.
John, it was a pleasure doing the show with you. And
as always,
we'll get
stay
you guys
well,
back
boys.
on.
Yeah, we'll get you back on. All right, guys. We'll see you. Stay low.
good night, headers.
See you at the big one, everybody.